Some moments don't arrive with noise or drama. They don't crash into your life. They knock. And if you open the door, everything you thought you understood about your past, your child, and even yourself can quietly rearrange forever. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. And tell me, where are you watching from today? I read every comment, and I'd love to know which cities and towns are joining me for this story that stayed with me for years. Because this isn't just a memory, it's a moment that changed me. The knock, ordinary, but not really. I thought I was prepared for that afternoon. I truly did. The house was quiet in that particular way. It only becomes when your child is grown, and no longer lives under your roof. Not peaceful exactly, just still. I was sitting at the kitchen table, sorting through mail I didn't want to read. Bills, advertisements, a postcard from a cousin I hadn't seen in decades. Life reduced to paper and routine. Then I heard the knock. Not loud, not rushed, just firm enough to make me look up. Something about it made my chest tighten before I even stood. The face from the past. When I opened the door, I had to blink twice. Daniel stood there, my son's old friend. I hadn't seen him in years, not since the boys had barely graduated college and gone their separate ways. He looked different now. Broader in the shoulders, a little heavier in the eyes. The kind of tired you earn honestly by living. He held his cap in both hands, turning it slightly, like he didn't know what to do with them. "Hi, Mrs. Carter," he said, then paused. "I mean, Linda." That hesitation told me everything. This wasn't a social visit, an uninvited fear. I stepped aside without thinking. "You'd better come in." The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. Afternoon light stretched across the carpet, catching dust floating lazily in the air. Daniel didn't sit right away. He stood near the window, staring at the oak tree outside, the same one my son used to climb when he was 12. My heart began to race. "Is my son okay?" I asked. It was instinct. Mothers don't outgrow that reflex. Daniel nodded quickly. "Yes, he's fine. This isn't about that." But his voice wavered just enough to tell me it was close. Very close. Words he didn't want to carry alone. He took a breath. Then another. "I didn't know where else to go," he said quietly. "And I figured you should hear it from someone who was there." That's when I felt it. That slow, sinking certainty. The kind that tells you the air in the room is about to change. I pulled out the chair and sat down. I didn't trust my legs anymore. The story, carefully unfolded. Daniel told me about a night years earlier. A long drive. A funeral I hadn't even known about. He spoke slowly, choosing his words like each one was fragile, like he was laying something breakable on the table between us. What he shared wasn't scandalous, not in the way people expect. It was heavier than that. It was about a promise my son had made, a choice he carried quietly, a truth he believed would protect me if it stayed hidden. As Daniel spoke, I noticed the small things. The way his voice softened when he said my son's name, the way his fingers twisted the edge of his cap, the respect in his tone, even while delivering something that settled deep in my chest. The silence after truth. When he finished, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked loudly enough to feel rude. Outside, a car passed. Someone laughed down the street. Life continued, unaware that something fundamental had shifted inside my home. Inside me, a quiet handoff. I stood and went to the kitchen. Not because I knew what to do, but because movement felt safer than stillness. I poured 2 glasses of water. My hands shook just slightly. When I returned, Daniel thanked me, not for the water, but for listening. That's when I understood. This wasn't just information. It was weight. And he had trusted me to carry part of it. I didn't know then how much that afternoon would echo through the years ahead. I only knew one thing. The woman who opened the door that day was not the same woman who sat back down. After Daniel left that first afternoon, the house didn't feel empty. It felt altered, like someone had moved furniture inside my chest without asking permission. I stood at the front window long after his car disappeared down the street, my reflection floating over the quiet road, as if I were watching someone else's life from a distance. I expected tears. They didn't come. That surprised me more than anything. Instead, I went back into the kitchen and started making dinner. Something simple, something familiar. A meal I'd cooked so many times, my hands knew the steps better than my mind did. Muscle memory carried me forward while my thoughts looped backward. I kept replaying my son's childhood, searching for moments I might have misunderstood. The long silences, the days he hugged me just a little longer. The questions he never asked, the answers he never gave. That night, sleep avoided me. I lay in bed listening to the house breathe, the refrigerator humming, the hallway clock ticking, the old walls settling. Every sound felt louder than it should have been, like the house was reminding me it remembered everything. Somewhere between midnight and morning, a truth settled in. My son had grown into a man with an inner world I didn't fully know. And maybe that wasn't a failure. Maybe that was just life. The second knock. The next afternoon, Daniel came back. I could tell he hadn't planned to. He stood on the porch again, sunlight behind him, looking unsure whether he should knock. This time, I opened the door before he could. "I hope it's okay," he said. "I kept thinking about yesterday. About you." I surprised myself by smiling. "Come in." I was just making coffee. We sat at the same kitchen table, but it felt different now. Less formal, less guarded. The tension had softened, replaced by something quieter, almost familiar. At first, we talked about ordinary things. Work, traffic, how strange it is that years pass without warning. Then, naturally, the conversation drifted back to my son. Daniel shared stories I had never heard. Late-night drives, long conversations about responsibility, about doing the right thing even when it's hard and no one is watching. I listened, not as a worried mother this time, but as a woman learning who her child had become. At one point, Daniel paused and looked at me carefully. "You know," he said, "he gets a lot of his steadiness from you." I laughed softly. "If only you'd seen me on my bad days." But his words stayed with me. So did the way he said them. There was no agenda in his voice. No hidden meaning, just respect. Something shared, not taken. When Daniel left that second time, I felt lighter. Not because the truth had changed, but because it no longer lived only inside me. I realized then that growth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, in conversations at a kitchen table, in the space between what we thought we knew and what we're finally ready to understand. That evening, I called my son. We didn't talk about everything, not yet, but we talked, really talked. And when we hung up, I sat for a long time, feeling older, yes, but also strangely new. In the weeks that followed, I found myself thinking about Daniel more than I expected. Not in a restless way, not with confusion, just curiosity. He had become a bridge between who my son used to be and who he was now, and somehow, between who I had been and who I was becoming. Life didn't pause just because my inner world had shifted. I still went to the grocery store on Tuesdays, still watered the plants every morning, still waved at my neighbor Frank, who always asked if my son was visiting soon. But beneath those routines, something new was taking shape. A sense that discovery doesn't end just because the world thinks it should. Daniel checked in occasionally. A short call, a message asking how I was holding up. Nothing excessive, nothing inappropriate. It felt considerate, like he understood the balance between presence and space. When we talked, the conversations were easy, honest. We spoke about aging parents, about choices we wished we could redo, about how strange it feels when people expect you to have life figured out just because your hair has a few more gray strands. The walk. One afternoon, he asked if I'd like to take a walk. There was a park nearby, the same one where I used to push my son on the swings when he was small. I hesitated only a second before saying yes. The air was crisp, the kind that makes you breathe deeper without trying. We walked slowly, side by side, no rush to fill every silence. Leaves crunched beneath our feet. A dog barked somewhere nearby, chasing nothing at all. I wasn't sure if this was a good idea, Daniel admitted after a while. But I didn't want things to feel unfinished. That word stayed with me. Unfinished. It reminded me that not every meaningful connection needs a label. Some are simply chapters that overlap. We sat on a bench near the pond. The water reflected the sky, broken only by the ripple of a passing duck. Daniel talked about his own life, choices he'd made, paths he'd stepped away from. I listened, not offering advice unless he asked. It felt good to be trusted, not as someone's mother, but as myself. Balance. When we stood to leave, I felt something settle. Nothing dramatic had happened. No lines crossed. No promises made. Just two people acknowledging that connection can exist without complication. And that respect doesn't limit understanding, it deepens it. That night, I opened a journal I hadn't touched in years. I wrote about change. About how growth doesn't stop just because time keeps moving. And for the first time in a long while, I felt fully present in my own story, not just a supporting character in someone else's. By the time autumn gave way to winter, the memory of that first knock no longer felt sharp. It softened into something steady, like a stone you keep in your pocket to remind yourself where you've been. My son came to visit just before the holidays. We cooked together, bumped elbows in the kitchen, laughed at small things. Later, sitting across from each other with mugs warming our hands, we finally talked about everything Daniel had shared months earlier. There were long pauses, but no anger, only honesty. He told me why he'd stayed quiet for so long, how he thought silence was protection. I told him something I'd learned late in life: love doesn't require silence, and strength doesn't mean carrying everything alone. When he left, I felt a deep, settled peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was real. Daniel and I stayed in touch, though less often. Holiday cards, occasional check-ins. What mattered wasn't frequency, but understanding. He had been a messenger, yes, but more than that, he was a reminder that meaningful moments can arrive unexpectedly, that growth doesn't announce itself, that sometimes all it does is knock, and wait to see if you're willing to open the door. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the quietest moments change us the most.